In the vast expanse of the galaxy, where strength is measured by the sharpness of claws and the thickness of hide, humans are considered the weakest species ever discovered. Their soft skin tears like paper, their fragile bones snap under minimal pressure, and their pathetic bite force couldn't puncture a fruit's skin. The Galactic Council classified them as prey species, barely worth protecting, certainly not worth respecting. But the universe has a twisted sense of humor. When the Kethvar, apex predators who have never known defeat, whose very name makes entire star systems surrender without firing a shot, encounter a single human maintenance worker on a forgotten mining station, everything the galaxy thought it knew about strength, weakness, and survival is about to be shattered forever. Sometimes, the most dangerous predator is the one that doesn't look like a predator at all. Marcus Chen had learned to make himself invisible long before he left Earth. On the mining station Kepler 442b, this skill had become a matter of survival. As the only human among a crew of 200 aliens, he had mastered the art of moving through corridors like a ghost, completing his maintenance duties without drawing attention to his soft pink skin or his embarrassingly small frame. The other species on the station barely acknowledged his existence. The Thrukari, with their crystalline exoskeletons, treated him like a piece of delicate equipment that might break if handled roughly. The Vorthan, massive bear-like creatures with metallic fur, would grunt dismissively when he squeezed past them in narrow passages. Even the peaceful Zolani, who resembled upright insects, would unconsciously step away when he approached, as if his weakness might be contagious. Marcus didn't blame them. According to every biological assessment conducted by the Galactic Council, humans ranked dead last in physical capability among all known sapient species. Their bite force measured a pathetic 162 pounds per square inch, compared to the Kethvar's devastating 12,000. Their running speed maxed out around 28 miles per hour for short bursts, while most predator species could maintain 60 miles per hour for hours. Human bones contained calcium phosphate, a mineral so common and fragile that many species used it as a dietary supplement. The irony wasn't lost on Marcus that he had ended up on a mining station extracting the very metals that other species had naturally occurring in their bodies. Every day he watched Thrukari workers casually lifting beams that would crush him, while Vorthan security guards patrolled with claws that could slice through his torso like warm butter. But Marcus had something that the biological assessments never measured: patience, adaptability, and a peculiar talent for fixing things that shouldn't be fixable. The mining station operated on a complex network of atmospheric processors, gravity generators, and life support systems that had been cobbled together from a dozen different alien technologies. What the other species saw as incompatible systems, Marcus saw as a puzzle waiting to be solved. While they brute-forced repairs by replacing entire components, Marcus would spend hours tracing circuits, understanding the elegant ways that different technologies could communicate with each other. It was this obsession with understanding rather than overpowering that led to his first real interaction with Station Commander Vexstar, a Thrukari whose crystalline plates had taken on a deep blue hue that indicated both age and authority. "Human," Vexstar had said, the universal translator rendering his crystal chime voice into flat English. "The atmospheric processor in Section 7 has failed. Our engineers estimate a 14-day repair timeline." Marcus had nodded, expecting to be assigned some menial support role in the repair effort. Instead, Vexstar handed him a datapad containing the technical specifications. "You will handle this repair alone. The section will remain sealed until completion." The dismissal in Vexstar's tone was clear. This was busy work, a way to keep the human occupied while the real engineers handled more important tasks. Marcus had taken the assignment without protest, gathering his tools and heading to Section 7. What he found there would have sent most engineers back to requisition new parts and plan for a complete system replacement. The atmospheric processor wasn't just broken, it was a disaster. Coolant lines had burst, flooding the chamber with toxic chemicals. Electrical systems had shorted out, leaving scorch marks across critical components. The main processing unit had somehow fused with part of the gravity generator, creating a technological nightmare that defied conventional repair methods. But as Marcus studied the damage, he began to see something else: an opportunity. The atmospheric processor had been designed for a Vorthan station, built to handle the massive air circulation requirements of their large bodies. The gravity generator was Zilani technology, precise and efficient. The electrical systems were human-made, Earth-standard components that had been hastily adapted for alien use. Instead of trying to separate the fused systems, Marcus began to understand how they might work together. The gravity generator's precision could be used to regulate the atmospheric processor's intake, The human electrical systems, though considered primitive by galactic standards, operated on frequencies that wouldn't interfere with either alien technology. For 6 days, Marcus worked alone in Section 7. He rerouted power through backup systems he created from spare parts. He modified the coolant circulation to use the gravity generator's field manipulation as a pump. He wrote new software protocols that translated between the 3 different technological languages, creating a hybrid system that was more efficient than any of its individual components. When he finally emerged from Section 7 and informed Vexstar that the repairs were complete, the station commander's crystalline plate shifted to a surprised yellow. "Impossible, show me." The atmospheric processor hummed with perfect efficiency, maintaining ideal atmospheric conditions while using 30% less power than its original design. The gravity generator operated with precision that exceeded factory specifications. The electrical systems ran so smoothly that their usual background hum had disappeared entirely. Vexstar stood in silence for a long moment, his plate cycling through colors that Marcus had learned indicated deep thought. "How?" the commander finally asked. Marcus struggled to explain. How could he describe the human ability to see patterns across different systems, to find connections that weren't supposed to exist, to create solutions from problems? Other species specialized. Drakari were exceptional at crystalline technology. Vorthan excelled at heavy engineering. Zalani dominated precision manufacturing. Humans seemed to be mediocre at everything, but that mediocrity allowed them to understand a little bit about all technologies. "I listened to what the machines were trying to do," Marcus said finally. "Instead of making them do what they were designed for, I helped them do what they wanted to do." Vexstar's plates shifted to a color Marcus had never seen before. A deep purple shot through with silver veins. Word of the Section 7 repair spread through the station with surprising speed. Suddenly, Marcus found himself called to fix problems that had been deemed unfixable. A communication array that had been fritzing for months began working perfectly, after Marcus spent 3 hours understanding why it was trying to connect to systems it wasn't supposed to reach. A food processor that had been producing inedible meals was restored to perfect function when Marcus realized it was homesick for different ingredient ratios. But it was the plasma containment field incident that changed everything. The station's main reactor operated on contained plasma that reached temperatures of 50 million degrees Celsius. The containment field was generated by a massive HFY design system that was considered absolutely reliable. HFY technology never failed because HFY never accepted anything less than perfection. When alarms began shrieking throughout the station, announcing containment field fluctuations, every engineer rushed to the reactor chamber. The readings made no sense. The containment field was operating within normal parameters, but plasma was somehow bleeding through at specific points. The leak was minimal now, but growing steadily. The chief engineer, a massive Vorthan named Gorth, was already preparing evacuation procedures when Marcus arrived. 37 minutes until catastrophic failure, Gorth announced. All non-essential personnel to escape pods immediately. Marcus stared at the readings, his mind racing through possibilities. Plasma couldn't bleed through a properly functioning containment field. It was physically impossible. But something was happening. And if they evacuated, the station would be destroyed, along with 6 months of mining operations that represented millions of credits. "The field isn't failing," Marcus said suddenly. Every head in the room turned toward him. Gorth's massive form loomed over the human. "Explain yourself, soft skin." Marcus pointed to the containment field generators. "Look at the resonance patterns. The field is perfect, but something is harmonizing with it. Something is teaching the plasma how to slip between the containment frequencies." The other engineers stared at him blankly. What he was describing was impossible. Plasma was superheated matter, not an intelligent entity that could learn. But Marcus was already moving, pulling up diagnostic programs and tracing energy signatures. There, buried in the system logs, was the answer. A microscopic quantum resonator, probably a piece of debris from a destroyed ship, had somehow become embedded in the plasma. It was analyzing the containment field frequencies and slowly teaching the plasma to match them. "Shut down the reactor," Marcus said. "We need to flush the plasma and extract the resonator." "Absolutely not," Gorth growled. "Reactor shutdown and restart takes 18 hours. We'll lose the entire day's mining quota." Marcus looked around the room at faces that ranged from doubtful to hostile. These were beings whose physical capabilities exceeded his own by orders of magnitude, whose technologies could accomplish feats that humans could barely comprehend. But none of them understood what he understood. Sometimes the solution to a complex problem was elegant simplicity. "Give me 15 minutes, Marcus said. Before anyone could protest, he was already climbing into the reactor access shaft. The heat hit him immediately. temperatures that would be uncomfortable for most species, but not immediately lethal to his surprisingly heat-tolerant human physiology. His smaller size allowed him to navigate maintenance passages that would be impossible for larger species. The quantum resonator was smaller than a grain of sand. Embedded in the plasma flow like a parasite, Marcus had one chance to extract it without destabilizing the entire system. He connected his diagnostic equipment directly to the containment field generators, then began manually adjusting frequencies. Instead of trying to overpower the resonator, Marcus began to understand it. The device was HFY in origin, designed as a plasma analysis tool. It wasn't malicious, it was just doing what it was built to do, analyzing and learning. Marcus began to communicate with it through frequency modulations, essentially teaching it that its current location was inappropriate for its function. Slowly, carefully, Marcus guided the resonator out of the plasma flow and into a containment cylinder. The plasma bleed stopped immediately. Containment field strength returned to optimal levels. When Marcus emerged from the access shaft, the reactor chamber was silent. Every engineer stared at him with expressions he couldn't interpret. "How?" Gorth asked. Marcus held up the containment cylinder with its microscopic prisoner. "I asked it nicely to leave." The silence stretched for another long moment. Then Vextar's plates began cycling through rapid color changes that Marcus recognized as laughter. The human communicated with a quantum resonator, the station commander announced to the room. "Perhaps our classification systems require revision." That night, for the first time since arriving at the station, Marcus found himself invited to join the senior staff for their evening meal. The conversation was stilted, filled with the awkwardness of beings trying to reassess everything they thought they knew about humans. But it was Gorth who asked the question that would change Marcus's life forever. "Human Marcus," the Vorthan said, his voice carrying a respect that hadn't been there before. "What do you know about the HFY?" Marcus shrugged. "Same as everyone else, I suppose. Apex predators. Never been defeated in battle. They don't interact with other species much except to establish dominance. The HFY are coming here," Vextar announced. "A single ship, arriving in 6 days. They wish to inspect our mining operations." A chill ran through the room. HFY inspections were legendary throughout the galaxy. They would assess everything: efficiency, security, the competence of personnel. Species that failed HFY inspection often found their mining rights revoked, their operations shut down. "They will examine our repairs," Vextar continued, his plate shifting to worried amber. "They will assess our problem-solving capabilities. They will judge whether we are worthy of continuing operations in their territory." All eyes turned to Marcus, the human who had accomplished the impossible, who had fixed unfixable problems, who had communicated with a quantum resonator. "They will be particularly interested in anomalies," Gorth added quietly. Marcus felt the weight of their expectations settling on his shoulders. 6 days to prepare for beings whose very presence made hardened warriors tremble. 6 days before he would face creatures that represented everything humans were not. Powerful, deadly, absolutely confident in their superiority. But as Marcus looked around the table at faces that had gone from dismissive to respectful, he felt something stirring inside him that he had never experienced before. Not confidence exactly, but a quiet certainty that understanding was often more powerful than strength. The HFY were coming, and Marcus Chen, the weakest human on a station full of aliens, was about to discover that sometimes predators recognize something in prey that prey didn't recognize in themselves. Outside the station's windows, the stars wheeled in their ancient patterns, indifferent to the drama about to unfold. But in the depths of space, a HFY ship had already begun its journey toward Kepler 442b, carrying aboard it a being whose very nature would challenge everything the galaxy thought it understood about strength and weakness. The hunt was about to begin. The HFY ship arrived exactly on schedule, materializing from hyperspace with the kind of precision that made other species nervous. Unlike the bulky industrial vessels that typically visited mining stations, the HFY craft was a work of art designed for killing. Its hull gleamed like polished obsidian, covered in geometric patterns that seemed to shift and move when observed directly. Weapon systems that could reduce the mining station to atoms were integrated so seamlessly into the design that they appeared almost decorative. Marcus watched from the observation deck as the ship approached, feeling a primal fear that his rational mind couldn't suppress. Every human instinct screamed at him to run, to hide, to make himself as small and invisible as possible. The ship radiated menace the way a star radiated heat, as a fundamental property of its existence. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Vextar's voice made Marcus jump. The station commander had approached silently. His crystalline plates are nervous yellow-green. HFY ships are said to be grown rather than built. Each one is unique, shaped by the personality of its owner. Marcus studied the vessel's predatory lines. What does this one tell us about its owner? That we are about to meet a being who views violence as art. Vextar replied quietly. The docking process was flawless. The HFY ship attached to the station's primary docking bay with movements so smooth they seemed choreographed. No communication had been exchanged. The HFY simply expected the station to accommodate them, and the station's systems had complied automatically. Marcus found himself in the reception committee despite his attempts to avoid the honor. Vextar had insisted that all senior staff be present, and Marcus's recent contributions apparently qualified him for that designation. He stood in the docking bay, surrounded by beings who towered over him, trying to project confidence he didn't feel. The airlock cycled open with a soft hiss. The being that emerged redefined Marcus's understanding of Predator. The HFY stood nearly 9 feet tall, but height was the least impressive aspect of its presence. Its body was a masterpiece of evolutionary engineering, lean muscle covered by skin that seemed to shift between charcoal black and deep purple depending on the angle of light. Forearms moved with liquid grace, each ending in hands that possessed both delicate precision and crushing strength. Its face was simultaneously beautiful and terrifying, features that might have been elegant on a more peaceful species, but which were marked by predatory intelligence that made Marcus's ancient survival instincts scream warnings. But it was the eyes that made Marcus understand why entire civilizations surrendered rather than face the HFY in battle. They were the deep gold of a hunting cat, but with an intelligence that spoke of strategic thinking that spanned centuries. When those eyes swept across the reception committee, Marcus felt as though he was being evaluated as both a potential threat and a potential meal. I am Warsinger Zaktar, the HFY announced, its voice carrying harmonics that seemed to resonate in Marcus's bones. I come to assess this operation's worthiness. The title made Marcus's blood run cold. He had heard of Warsingers, HFY who had earned their status through combat achievements that passed into legend. They were living weapons, beings who had perfected violence to an art form. Vextar's plate shifted through several colors before settling on formal blue. Warsinger, we are honored by your presence. I am Station Commander Vextar. These are my senior staff. Zaktar's golden eyes moved across each committee member, lingering for a moment on Gorth's massive frame, dismissing the Zilani engineers as irrelevant. When those eyes reached Marcus, they stopped. The silence stretched for heartbeats that felt like hours. Marcus forced himself to meet that predatory gaze, knowing that showing fear would be worse than showing disrespect. Up close, he could see details that the distance had hidden. Scars that crossed the HFY's skin in patterns that suggested they were decorative rather than accidental. Muscle definition that spoke of strength that could literally tear Marcus apart. Interesting, Zaktar said finally. A human. I have studied your species' biological assessments. You should not exist. Before Marcus could respond, Vextar intervened. Warsinger, if you would allow us to show you our operations. Later, Zaktar dismissed the station commander, without taking his eyes off Marcus. Human, you are assigned to accompany me during my inspection. I wish to understand how such a weak creature survives in this environment. The pronouncement sent shocked ripples through the assembled aliens. Being personally selected by a Warsinger could be either an honor or a death sentence, depending on the Warsinger's mood and the human's performance. Marcus found his voice. I would be honored to serve as your guide, Warsinger. Something that might have been amusement flickered in those golden eyes. We shall see. The inspection began in the Mining Operations Center, where massive extraction equipment processed raw materials into refined metals. Zaktar moved through the facility with predatory grace, analyzing everything with an attention to detail that was simultaneously impressive and unnerving. His questions were precise, cutting through engineering explanations to reach the core principles behind each system. But Marcus began to notice something strange. While Zaktar's questions appeared to focus on technical specifications and operational efficiency, they consistently probed deeper issues. How did different species work together? What happened when standard procedures failed? How were problems solved when conventional solutions proved inadequate? Show me the atmospheric processor in Section 7. Zaktar commanded after reviewing the mining equipment. Marcus felt every eye in the room turn toward him. This was his repair, his moment of triumph. But under the Warsinger's scrutiny, it felt more like a test he might fail catastrophically. They walked to Section 7 in silence, Zaktar's presence making normal conversation impossible. Other station personnel literally pressed themselves against walls to create more space as they passed, their survival instincts recognizing apex predator, even when their rational minds knew the war singer was technically an ally. In Section 7, Zakhtar examined the hybrid system with an intensity that made Marcus nervous. Those four hands moved over control panels and connection points with surprising delicacy, tracing the modifications Marcus had made with what appeared to be genuine interest. "Explain your reasoning," Zakhtar commanded. Marcus launched into his explanation, describing how he had analyzed the compatibility issues between different technological systems and found ways to make them work together rather than against each other. As he spoke, he found himself warming to the subject, his nervousness fading as he described the elegant solutions he had discovered. Zakhtar listened in absolute silence, those golden eyes never leaving Marcus's face. When the explanation finished, the war singer reached out with one hand and touched a connection point that Marcus had modified. "This junction should not function," Zakhtar observed. "Thrakari crystal technology operates on harmonic frequencies that are incompatible with Zilani precision systems." "That's what the manuals say," Marcus agreed. "But I discovered that if you modulate the frequency at specific intervals, the systems begin to resonate together instead of interfering with each other. You taught them to communicate." "In a way, yes." Zakhtar turned those predatory eyes fully on Marcus. "And the quantum resonator incident?" Marcus described the plasma containment crisis, explaining how he had identified the microscopic device and convinced it to relocate itself. As he spoke, he watched Zakhtar's face for any sign of reaction, but the war singer's expression remained unreadable. "You communicated with a quantum resonator," Zakhtar said when the explanation ended. "I wouldn't call it communication exactly," Marcus replied. "More like negotiation. The resonator was just doing what it was designed to do. I helped it understand that it could do its job better somewhere else." For the first time, something that might have been emotion flickered across Zakhtar's features. "Show me the resonator." They walked to the engineering lab, where Marcus had stored the microscopic device. Under high magnification, the quantum resonator looked like a tiny jewel, its crystalline structure reflecting light in patterns that hurt to look at directly. Zakhtar studied the device with an intensity that made Marcus uncomfortable. Those golden eyes seemed to be seeing something that Marcus couldn't perceive. "This is HFY technology," the war singer said finally. "Military grade. It was designed for plasma analysis on battlefield conditions." Marcus felt his stomach drop. I didn't know it was causing the containment breach, so You extracted it without damaging either the resonator or the containment system," Zakhtar continued. "This device is worth more than this entire mining operation, yet you removed it safely and preserved its function." The silence that followed felt dangerous. Marcus couldn't tell if he was being praised or accused of theft. "How did you know to communicate with it through frequency modulation?" Zakhtar asked. Marcus struggled to find words. "I didn't know exactly, but it seemed like the resonator was trying to understand something, so I thought, maybe if I could help it understand what I needed." "You treated a military analysis device as though it were a living being." "I guess I did." Zakhtar moved closer, close enough that Marcus could see his reflection in those golden eyes. The war singer's presence was overwhelming, filling the space around them with an aura of controlled violence that made Marcus's heart race. "Human Marcus," Zakhtar said, and his voice carried harmonics that seemed to vibrate through Marcus's entire body. "What do you know of the HFY concept of heart sight?" "Nothing. Heart sight is the ability to perceive the true nature of things beyond their surface appearance. It allows a hunter to understand prey not merely as food, but as a living being with its own intelligence and motivations. It allows a warrior to anticipate an enemy's actions by understanding their deepest desires and fears." The explanation made Marcus increasingly nervous. "That sounds like a valuable ability. It is the rarest gift among my people," Zakhtar continued. "Most HFY are born with physical perfection. Strength, speed, senses that can detect prey from vast distances. But heart sight cannot be taught. It cannot be enhanced through training or technology. A being either possesses it naturally, or they do not." Marcus waited, sensing that more explanation was coming. "You demonstrated heart sight when you communicated with incompatible technologies," Zakhtar said. "You showed it again when you understood the quantum resonator's nature and needs. These are not abilities that appear in any assessment of human capabilities." "I just try to understand how things work," Marcus replied. No, Zaktar corrected. And now those golden eyes seem to be looking directly into Marcus's soul. You understand how things want to work. You perceive the essential nature beneath the surface function. This is heart sight in its purest form. The war singer turned away, moving to examine other equipment in the lab. But Marcus could feel a change in the atmosphere, as though some invisible barrier between them had dissolved. War singer, Marcus said carefully. Why is this important? Zaktar's answer came without turning around. Because in 3 cycles, I will be leading a hunt for something that has been killing HFY warriors. Something that conventional strength and speed cannot touch. Something that requires heart sight to understand and defeat. The implications hit Marcus like a physical blow. You want me to join your hunt? I want you to help me understand prey that thinks like you do, Zaktar corrected. Prey that solves problems through unconventional methods. Prey that communicates with systems it should not be able to influence. Marcus felt the weight of the war singer's request settling around him like a trap. What kind of prey kills HFY warriors? When Zaktar finally turned back to face him, those golden eyes held something Marcus had never expected to see in a predator's gaze. Uncertainty. Something that should not exist, the warsinger said quietly. Something that appears weak but possesses capabilities that defy all understanding. Something very much like humans. The silence that followed was filled with implications that made Marcus's mind race. He was being asked to help hunt his own species, or something similar to them. But the alternative, refusing a warsinger's request, would likely result in his immediate death and the destruction of everything he had worked to protect on the station. If I agree to help you, Marcus said carefully, what happens to the people here? To the station? They continue their operations under my protection, Zaktar replied immediately. Your station commander has demonstrated competence. Your repairs have shown innovation. This operation will be designated as strategically valuable. Relief flooded through Marcus, followed immediately by a new kind of fear. He was trading his safety for the safety of his colleagues, but what he was agreeing to might be far more dangerous than anything he had faced on the mining station. How long would this hunt take? Until we succeed or until we die trying, Zaktar answered with brutal honesty. The prey we seek has already killed 12 of my warriors. Each death teaches it more about how to kill HFY. It grows more dangerous with every encounter. Marcus looked around the lab at the familiar equipment and the work he understood. In a few days, he would leave all of this behind, to venture into unknown space with a being who viewed violence as art form, hunting something that killed apex predators for sport. But as he studied Zaktar's scarred face and golden eyes, Marcus realized something that should have terrified him, but instead filled him with strange calm. The warsinger wasn't just recruiting him for his unusual abilities. He was asking for help, showing vulnerability that probably went against every instinct in his predatory nature. For the first time in his life, Marcus Chen was not the weakest being in the room. He possessed something that even an apex predator needed. When do we leave? Marcus asked. The smile that spread across Zaktar's features was sharp enough to cut diamond, but it held something that might have been respect. Tomorrow, the warsinger replied. Tonight, you feast with warriors. Tomorrow, you learn what it means to hunt among the HFY. As they walked back through the station corridors, Marcus noticed that other personnel no longer pressed themselves against walls when they passed. Instead, they watched with expressions that mixed fear and awe. Word had spread that the human had been chosen by the warsinger, that the weakest member of their crew had somehow earned the respect of the galaxy's apex predator. But Marcus barely noticed their stares. His mind was already racing ahead, trying to understand what kind of prey could kill 12 HFY warriors. What kind of enemy required heartsight to defeat? What waited for him in the darkness between stars? Tomorrow, he would begin to find out. Tonight, for the first time since leaving Earth, Marcus Chen would dine as an equal among beings who had never known weakness. The hunt was about to begin, and the prey had no idea that it was about to face something far more dangerous than HFY's strength and speed. It was about to face HFY intelligence combined with human understanding. The galaxy was about to learn that sometimes the most effective predators were the ones that didn't look like predators at all. The feast aboard the HFY ship was unlike anything Marcus had ever experienced. The vessel's interior defied the predatory beauty of its exterior. Instead of the sterile functionality he expected, Marcus found himself in spaces that resembled a combination of art gallery and shrine. The walls displayed weapons that had been elevated to artistic masterpieces, while bioluminescent panels cast shifting patterns of light that seemed to respond to the emotions of the occupants. Zaktar led Marcus through corridors lined with trophies that told the story of a life dedicated to perfecting violence. Crystalline structures that Marcus recognized as Thracarai exoskeleton fragments, metallic fur samples from Vorthan warriors, and other mementos from creatures Marcus couldn't identify. But these weren't crude displays of dominance. Each trophy was presented with reverence, as though honoring fallen opponents rather than celebrating their deaths. "These are the warriors who taught me," Zaktar explained when he noticed Marcus studying the displays. "Each one showed me something new about the nature of combat, strategy, or courage. To kill without learning is waste. To kill without honoring is mere murder." The dining chamber was circular, with a table that could seat dozens, but tonight held only two-place settings. The lighting was dimmer here, creating an intimate atmosphere that seemed designed for serious conversation. Marcus found himself seated across from the war singer, close enough to see details he had missed earlier. Zaktar's scars weren't random marks of battle. They were deliberately placed, following patterns that seemed to tell stories. Some were clearly decorative, artistic modifications that enhanced his already intimidating appearance. Others were battle wounds that had healed into proud reminders of survived conflicts. But a few carried a different quality, marks that seemed to represent something deeper than physical combat. The meal itself was surprisingly familiar, proteins and vegetables that might have come from Earth, though Marcus suspected they were sophisticated recreations designed to accommodate his biological needs. Zaktar ate with the same precision he brought to everything else, each movement economical and purposeful. "Tell me about your world," the war singer commanded between courses. Marcus described Earth as best he could, a planet where humans had risen to dominance not through individual strength, but through cooperation and tool use. He spoke of cities where millions of his kind lived together, of technologies that allowed physically weak beings to reshape entire continents, of wars where victory went to the side with better strategy rather than stronger warriors. Zaktar listened with an intensity that made Marcus feel as though each word was being catalogued and analyzed. Occasionally, the war singer would ask questions that revealed understanding of concepts Marcus had barely touched on. "Your species practices persistence hunting," Zaktar observed. "You exhaust prey through endurance rather than overpowering them with strength." "Our ancestors did," Marcus confirmed. "We're not fast, but we can maintain pursuit for hours or even days. Eventually, even the strongest prey becomes too tired to resist. And you apply this principle to problem-solving as well. You persist with challenges that other species abandon as impossible." Marcus hadn't thought about it in those terms, but he recognized the truth in Zaktar's observation. "I suppose we do. We keep trying different approaches until something works. This explains your success with incompatible technologies. Other species attempt direct solutions and abandon the problem when they fail. You continue experimenting until you understand the underlying nature." The conversation continued through several more courses, with Zaktar drawing connections between human behavior and hunting strategies that Marcus had never considered. The war singer's questions revealed a mind that approached every topic from the perspective of a tactical analyst, but also showed genuine curiosity about ways of thinking that differed from Kethvar approaches. "Now tell me about the prey we hunt," Marcus said when the meal began winding down. Zaktar's demeanor shifted immediately. The relaxed conversation partner disappeared, replaced by the predatory intelligence Marcus had first encountered. "They call themselves the Seekers," Zaktar began. "We know little about their origins or their true nature. What we know comes from the aftermath of their attacks." The war singer gestured, and the room's lighting dimmed as holographic displays materialized above the table. Marcus found himself looking at recordings from crime scenes that defied understanding. The first display showed the wreckage of a Kethvar patrol ship. The hull had been breached in dozens of places, but the damage patterns made no sense. Instead of the massive tears that conventional weapons would create, the ship looked as though it had been dissected by something with surgical precision. Internal systems had been removed with care that bordered on reverence. 12 warriors aboard, Zaktar narrated. All found dead, but not killed through conventional combat. They appear to have been studied, examined. Their bodies showed signs of analysis that went beyond mere autopsy. The next display revealed a research station that had been similarly treated. The facility was intact, but every piece of technology had been disassembled and reorganized in patterns that suggested systematic investigation rather than random destruction. "The Seekers learn from every encounter," Zaktar continued. "They analyze our weapons, our tactics, our physiology. Each attack shows greater understanding of Kethvar capabilities." Marcus studied the holographic evidence with growing unease. The precision of the damage, the methodical approach to investigation, the obvious intelligence behind the attacks. It all reminded him of his own approach to understanding complex systems. "What do they want?" Marcus asked. "Knowledge," Zaktar replied immediately. "They seek to understand everything they encounter, but their methods require dissection, analysis through destruction." The final display showed surveillance footage from a trading station where Seekers had been spotted before an attack. Marcus felt his blood freeze as he saw the creatures responsible for the systematic destruction. They looked disturbingly human. The beings in the recording were bipedal, roughly human-sized, with similar proportions and movement patterns. But where humans had soft skin and vulnerable bodies, these creatures were covered in what appeared to be adaptive armor that shifted and changed as they moved. Their faces were obscured by helmets that pulsed with bioluminescent patterns, but their body language conveyed intelligence and purpose. "They adapt," Zaktar explained. "Their technology changes based on what they encounter. Their tactics evolve in real time. They are everything that makes humans unusual, but enhanced beyond natural limitations." Marcus watched the footage with horrified fascination. The Seekers moved through the trading station with fluid coordination. Their activities focused on specific technologies and information sources. They weren't random destroyers. They were researchers conducting field studies with methods that happened to be lethal to their subjects. "How many encounters have there been?" Marcus asked. 7 confirmed attacks over the past 2 cycles. Each one more sophisticated than the last. They are learning faster than we can adapt our defenses. The implications were staggering. If these creatures were essentially enhanced humans with the same drive to understand and adapt, they represented a threat that conventional HFY methods couldn't address. Strength and speed were useless against enemies who could analyze and counter every tactic in real time. "Why do you think I can help?" Marcus asked, though he was beginning to understand the answer. "Because you think like they do," Zaktar replied. "You approach problems through understanding rather than force. You communicate with systems that should not respond to communication. You find solutions that should not exist." The war singer leaned forward, those golden eyes intense with predatory focus. "But more than that, you possess something they have lost in their enhancement: restraint. The Seekers understand everything they encounter, but they understand it through destruction. You understand through preservation." Marcus felt the weight of expectations settling around him like a net. "You want me to predict their behavior. I want you to understand their nature well enough to anticipate their strategies. The Seekers are no longer entirely human, but their core thought patterns remain similar to yours. If you can think like them, we might be able to prepare for their adaptations." The responsibility was overwhelming. Marcus was being asked to help hunt beings that were essentially enhanced versions of his own species, creatures whose only crime was taking human curiosity and intelligence to logical but horrifying conclusions. But as he studied Zaktar's scarred face and golden eyes, Marcus realized that the war singer wasn't asking him to betray his species or abandon his principles. He was being asked to prevent the Seekers from destroying other civilizations in their quest for knowledge. "What's our first step?" Marcus asked. Zaktar's smile was sharp and predatory, but it held something that might have been approval. "We begin your education in HFY hunting methods. If you are to help me understand Seeker psychology, you must first understand how we approach prey that thinks." The war singer stood and gestured for Marcus to follow him deeper into the ship. They passed through chambers filled with equipment Marcus couldn't identify, training areas where weapon systems had been configured for practice scenarios, and libraries containing tactical information gathered from across the galaxy. Finally, they reached a chamber that made Marcus stop in amazement. The room was dominated by a massive tactical display that showed star charts spanning dozens of systems. Each Seeker attack was marked with detailed information about methods, targets, and outcomes. Lines connected the incidents, showing patterns of movement and escalation that painted a picture of systematic investigation across multiple civilizations. "This is our hunt map," Zaktar explained. "Every encounter, every piece of evidence, every tactical analysis we have compiled about Seeker behavior." Marcus studied the display with growing understanding. The Seekers weren't randomly attacking targets. They were following a research plan that spanned multiple species and technologies. Each attack built on knowledge gained from previous encounters, creating a learning curve that was accelerating at an alarming rate. "They're building towards something," Marcus realized. "All of this investigation, all of this learning, it's preparation for a larger objective." "That is our assessment as well," Zaktar agreed. "But we cannot determine what their ultimate goal might be. Their research encompasses weapons technology, biological systems, cultural patterns, even artistic expressions. The scope is too broad for conventional analysis." Marcus moved closer to the display, tracing the patterns of seeker activity with his eyes. Something about their research methodology felt familiar, but he couldn't quite identify what it reminded him of. "How long do we have before their next attack?" Marcus asked. "Based on previous patterns, approximately 6 standard days, but each interval has been shorter than the last. They are accelerating their schedule. 6 days to understand creatures that were essentially enhanced versions of his own species. 6 days to develop strategies for fighting enemies that adapted faster than conventional tactics could counter them. 6 days to prove that human understanding could be more valuable than Kethvar's strength." But as Marcus studied the tactical display and began to see patterns in seeker behavior that reminded him of his own approach to complex problems, he felt something stirring inside him that he had never experienced before. Not confidence exactly, but a sense of recognition. "War Singer," Marcus said quietly. "I think I understand what they're really seeking." Zaktar turned those predatory golden eyes on him with laser focus. "Explain." "They're not just gathering random knowledge. They're trying to understand the fundamental principles that govern how different species think and create. They want to know what makes each civilization unique." The War Singer was silent for a long moment, processing this observation. To what purpose? Marcus felt a chill run down his spine as the implications became clear. Because once they understand how every species thinks, they'll be able to predict and counter anything we might do against them. They're not just researching weapons or technology, they're researching minds. The silence that followed was filled with the weight of realization. The Seekers weren't just enhanced humans with better tools. They were researchers conducting the ultimate study, an analysis of consciousness itself across multiple species, and Marcus Chen, the weakest human on a mining station, was the only being in the galaxy who understood their methodology well enough to fight them. "Tomorrow we begin intensive training," Zaktar announced. "You will learn Kethvar combat techniques, tactical analysis, and weapons systems. But more importantly, you will teach me to think like a seeker." As they walked back through the ship's corridors, Marcus felt the weight of what he had agreed to settling fully on his shoulders. He was about to embark on a hunt that would pit him against enhanced versions of his own species, creatures that represented everything humans could become if they abandoned restraint and ethics in pursuit of pure knowledge. But he was no longer the invisible maintenance worker who had learned to survive by making himself small. Under Zaktar's predatory gaze, Marcus was beginning to understand that sometimes the most dangerous hunters were the ones that didn't look dangerous at all. The real hunt was about to begin, and for the first time in galactic history, an apex predator was about to discover what it meant to have a human as a partner rather than prey. The Seekers had no idea what was coming for them. The training began before dawn, if such concepts had meaning aboard a ship traveling through hyperspace. Marcus found himself in the vessel's combat training chamber, facing equipment designed to push Kethvar warriors to their limits. Under normal circumstances, the weapons would have been impossibly heavy for human hands, the targets too fast for human eyes, the simulations too complex for human minds to process. But Zaktar had made modifications. "Strength is not your weapon," the War Singer explained as he adjusted the training systems. "Speed is not your advantage. Your weapon is understanding. Your advantage is seeing what others cannot perceive." The modified weapons felt strange in Marcus's hands, lighter than they should be, but with weight distributed in ways that felt natural to human anatomy. The targeting systems had been recalibrated to highlight weaknesses rather than requiring overwhelming firepower. The tactical simulations emphasized pattern recognition and strategic thinking over raw combat ability, but the most significant change was in Zaktar himself. The predatory arrogance that had defined their early interactions was still present, but it was tempered by something Marcus hadn't expected from an apex predator: respect for different kinds of intelligence. "Show me how you would approach this scenario," Zaktar commanded, activating a holographic simulation. The display showed a space station under attack by unknown hostiles. Conventional tactical doctrine would call for immediate counterattack, overwhelming force applied to eliminate the threat as quickly as possible. But Marcus studied the pattern of the attack, the way the hostiles moved, the systems they targeted. "They're not trying to destroy the station," Marcus observed. "They're herding the defenders into specific positions." "Explain." Marcus highlighted the attack patterns, showing how the hostiles were deliberately avoiding critical systems while creating the impression of a full assault. "Look at their targeting priorities. They're hitting non-essential systems first, forcing repair crews to specific locations. The real attack will come when all the defenders are concentrated in predictable positions." Zaktar's golden eyes narrowed as he studied Marcus's analysis. "Continue the scenario." Instead of rushing to defend against the apparent attack, Marcus directed the station's defenses to prepare for assault from unexpected vectors. When the holographic simulation reached its climax, the real attack came exactly where Marcus had predicted, through ventilation systems and maintenance corridors that the defenders would have left unguarded if they had followed conventional tactics. Efficient, Zakhtar admitted. You saw through deception that would have fooled most military commanders. But Marcus was already studying the next scenario, his mind racing through possibilities. The training simulations weren't just random tactical exercises. They were based on actual Seeker encounters, modified to test different approaches to fighting an enemy that adapted to conventional strategies. Warsinger, Marcus said, pausing the simulation. These scenarios assume the Seekers are using deception and misdirection. But what if they're not? Explain. What if their attack patterns aren't intended to fool us? What if they're gathering data on how we respond to different types of threats? The silence that followed was heavy with implication. Marcus continued his analysis, highlighting details in the attack patterns that supported his hypothesis. Every Seeker encounter follows the same basic structure: initial probe to assess defensive capabilities, escalating pressure to force tactical responses, then systematic dismantling of whatever defenses prove most effective. They're not trying to win battles efficiently. They're conducting experiments. Zakhtar moved to the tactical display, his forearms dancing across control surfaces as he pulled up records from actual Seeker attacks. The patterns Marcus had identified were clearly visible once viewed through this perspective. If this analysis is correct, the Warsinger said slowly, then every encounter with Seekers has been giving them information about our tactical responses, which means they know exactly how HFY warriors think and fight, Marcus concluded. They've been studying you as intensively as you've been studying them. The implications were staggering. The Seekers hadn't just been randomly attacking. They had been conducting systematic analysis of HFY combat doctrine, gathering data that would allow them to predict and counter any conventional military response. But they don't know how humans think, Marcus added quietly. Zakhtar turned those predatory eyes on him with laser focus. Continue. They've been studying HFY tactical responses because you're the apex predators, the most dangerous military force in the galaxy. But humans were classified as prey species. They probably don't have significant data on how we approach combat or problem solving. Marcus moved to the display, highlighting gaps in the Seeker attack patterns. Look at these encounters. They systematically tested HFY strength, speed, weapons technology, even cultural responses to different types of threats. But they haven't tested persistence hunting. They haven't analyzed human-style pattern recognition. They haven't encountered our tendency to find solutions through understanding rather than overpowering. You believe this gives us an advantage? I think it's our only advantage, Marcus replied. Every conventional approach has been analyzed and countered, but they don't know how to predict human responses because they've never encountered humans in combat situations. Zakhtar was silent for a long moment, processing this insight. When he spoke again, his voice carried a quality Marcus had never heard before. Something that might have been hope. Then we must ensure that when they encounter human thinking, they encounter it in combination with HFY capabilities. The training intensified after that realization. But instead of trying to turn Marcus into a HFY warrior, Zakhtar began developing tactics that combined human analytical approaches with HFY execution capabilities. They practiced scenarios where Marcus would identify weaknesses or patterns, while Zakhtar provided the physical capability to exploit those discoveries. But the most significant development came when they began working on communication protocols. In combat, there will be no time for lengthy explanations, Zakhtar pointed out during a particularly intense training session. You must be able to convey tactical insights instantly. They developed a system of signals, subtle gestures and expressions that could communicate complex tactical information without alerting enemies to their coordination. Marcus learned to read the minute changes in Zakhtar's posture and movement that indicated different combat states, while the Warsinger learned to interpret human facial expressions and body language that revealed Marcus's analytical insights. But the breakthrough came when they realized that their partnership worked both ways. Marcus wasn't just providing analysis for Zakhtar to execute, he was learning to see combat from a predator's perspective, understanding the elegant mathematics of violence that the Warsinger had spent decades perfecting. You move differently now, Zakhtar observed during a hand-to-hand combat exercise. Marcus paused, realizing that the Warsinger was right. His movements had acquired a fluid quality that hadn't been there before, a sense of purpose and direction that came from understanding his role in a larger tactical framework. I'm starting to think like a hunter, Marcus admitted. No, Zaktar corrected. You are learning to think like a hunter while maintaining your human perspective. This is what makes our partnership unique. Their communication was interrupted by an alert from the ship's navigation systems. They had reached their destination, a trading station where seeker activity had been detected. The station hung in space like a wounded animal, its hull scarred by precise cuts that Marcus now recognized as seeker investigation methods. Emergency beacons broadcast distress signals that painted a picture of systematic destruction followed by detailed analysis of the wreckage. They were here recently, Zaktar announced after reviewing the sensor data. Perhaps within the last standard day. Marcus studied the station's damage patterns with new understanding. The precision of the cuts, the systematic approach to dismantling critical systems, the careful preservation of certain components for analysis. It all fit the pattern they had identified during training. Warsinger, Marcus said quietly. I don't think they're gone. Zaktar's golden eyes snapped to him with predatory focus. Explain. Look at the damage patterns. They've disabled the station's primary systems but left the hull intact. The life support is still functioning in several sections. If they were finished with their analysis, they would have destroyed everything and moved on. Marcus highlighted specific areas of the station on their tactical display. They're still conducting experiments. The station is being used as a laboratory. The implications sent a chill through the ship's atmosphere. If Marcus was correct, they weren't arriving at the aftermath of a Seeker attack. They were walking into an active research facility where the Seekers were still conducting their deadly investigations.
How many survivors? Zaktar asked.
The sensor sweeps revealed scattered life signs throughout the station. Dozens of beings trapped in sections that still maintained life support, probably being kept alive for ongoing analysis. We have a choice, Marcus observed. We can wait for the Seekers to finish their research and leave, then investigate the aftermath safely. Or we can intervene while they're still here and risk direct confrontation. Zaktar's smile was sharp enough to cut Diamond. Warsinger did not avoid confrontation. We seek it. But Marcus could see the tactical calculation behind the predatory bravado. This was their opportunity to encounter Seekers under controlled conditions, to test their theories about human thinking versus Seeker adaptability. What's our approach? Marcus asked. We board the station and locate the Seekers' primary research area. You analyze their methods and behavior while I prepare for combat. When we understand their current focus, we strike. The plan was simple in concept but terrifying in execution. They would be placing themselves directly in the path of creatures that had killed 12 HFY warriors, beings whose capabilities had been enhanced beyond natural limitations. But as Marcus checked his modified weapons and prepared for his first real combat encounter, he felt something stirring inside him that he had never experienced before. Not confidence exactly, but a sense of rightness. For the first time in his life, Marcus Chen wasn't the weakest being in a dangerous situation. He was part of a partnership that combined the best aspects of predator and prey, strength and intelligence, aggression and understanding. The Seekers were about to discover that their systematic analysis of galactic combat capabilities had missed something crucial. They had studied apex predators and dismissed prey species, never imagining that the two might work together. Ready? Zaktar asked as they approached the station's docking bay. Marcus took a deep breath, feeling the weight of modified weapons on his body and the presence of an apex predator at his side. Ready, he replied. The hunt was no longer theoretical. In minutes, they would be face-to-face with enhanced humans who had chosen to pursue knowledge through destruction. Marcus would finally understand whether human curiosity, tempered by restraint, could overcome human intelligence freed from ethical limitations. The station's docking bay opened before them like the mouth of a predator, scarred and damaged but still functional. Emergency lighting cast twisted shadows that seemed to move with malevolent purpose. Somewhere in the darkness ahead, the Seekers were conducting their research. Soon, they would discover that they had become subjects of investigation themselves. The real hunt was about to begin. The interior of the trading station was a masterpiece of controlled destruction. Marcus and Zaktar moved through corridors where every surface told a story of systematic investigation. Walls had been surgically opened to expose internal systems. Control panels had been carefully disassembled with components arranged in precise analytical patterns, and life support systems had been modified to maintain specific environmental conditions in different sections. But it was the silence that unnerved Marcus most. The station should have been filled with the sounds of emergency systems, desperate survivors, or ongoing destruction. Instead, there was only the whisper of recycled air and the distant hum of modified equipment. They're managing the environment, Marcus observed quietly, studying atmospheric readings on his scanner. Different sections are being maintained at different temperatures and pressure levels. Zaktar's golden eyes swept the corridor with predatory alertness. Experimental conditions. They are testing how different species respond to various stresses. The implication was chilling. The Seekers weren't just analyzing technology. They were conducting live experiments on the survivors, studying biological and psychological responses under controlled conditions. As they moved deeper into the station, Marcus began to understand the scope of the Seeker research operation. This wasn't a random attack or even a systematic raid. It was a full-scale laboratory where enhanced humans were conducting multidisciplinary analysis of everything that made other species unique. Warsinger, Marcus whispered, pointing to readings on his scanner. Life signs ahead, multiple species confined but alive. They approached a section where the Seekers had established what appeared to be observation chambers. Through reinforced transparent walls, Marcus could see beings from various species in separate containment areas. Prokari with their crystalline plates dulled by stress, Borthan warriors reduced to pacing in cramped spaces, Zelani workers huddled in corners with their insectoid forms trembling. But what made Marcus's blood run cold was the systematic nature of their confinement. Each chamber was equipped with different environmental stresses, monitoring equipment that tracked biological responses, and interfaces that appeared designed to test cognitive capabilities under various conditions. The Seekers were studying the fundamental nature of consciousness across multiple species. "We need to move," Zaktar urged. But Marcus was studying something else. "Look at the monitoring systems," Marcus said, highlighting details on his scanner. "They're not just observing these beings, they're communicating with them. Those interfaces are designed for interaction, not just passive monitoring." The realization hit both of them simultaneously. The Seekers weren't conducting experiments on unwilling subjects. They were conducting interviews. "They're learning how different species think by asking them directly," Marcus breathed. "The physical confinement isn't for control, it's for focus. They're eliminating distractions so they can conduct pure psychological analysis." Zaktar's expression darkened as he processed this insight, which means they now have detailed information about the thought patterns of every major galactic species. "Except humans," Marcus added, "because we're classified as prey. They probably haven't bothered to capture any humans for analysis." But even as he said it, Marcus realized they had encountered a new problem. If the Seekers were conducting systematic psychological analysis rather than simple raids, they would have contingency plans for unexpected visitors. Their current research operation would include security measures designed to protect their data collection. An alert tone echoed through the corridor, confirming Marcus's fears. They had been detected. "Movement patterns suggest enhanced human physiology," came a voice through the station's communication systems. The words were spoken in perfect galactic standard, but with inflections that sounded disturbingly familiar to Marcus. "Accompanied by Kefar Warsinger, designation unknown." Fascinating. Zaktar's forearms moved to weapon grips with fluid grace, but Marcus held up a hand. "Wait," Marcus said. "They're not treating us as immediate threats, they're curious about us." "Correct assessment, enhanced human," the voice continued. "You represent an unprecedented research opportunity. Standard classification indicates your species lacks significant military capabilities, yet you have partnered with Apex Predator. Please explain this anomaly." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. The Seekers were treating their arrival as part of their research project. They wanted to understand how a prey species had formed an alliance with a predator species. "They're going to try to capture us," Marcus realized. "Not to kill us, but to study us." "Let them try," Zaktar growled. But Marcus could see the tactical problem they faced. The Seekers had already demonstrated the ability to kill Kefar warriors. If they could analyze a Warsinger's combat capabilities while simultaneously studying human psychology, their research would advance exponentially. "We need to change the parameters of their experiment," Marcus said suddenly. "Explain." "They expect us to behave like conventional hunter and prey. The Kefar attacks with strength and speed while the human cowers in fear or flees. But what if we do something they haven't analyzed?" Marcus was already moving, heading not away from the Seeker presence but toward it. "Follow my lead, but be ready for anything." They found the Seekers in what had been the station's main conference chamber, now converted into a command center bristling with analytical equipment. 3 enhanced humans worked at control stations, their adaptive armor shifting and pulsing as it processed incoming data streams. They were beautiful in their perfection, human forms enhanced with technology that eliminated every weakness. while preserving the intelligence and adaptability that made humans unique. But when they turned to face Marcus and Zaktar, their expressions revealed something that made Marcus's heart race with recognition. Beneath the technological enhancements, behind the adaptive armor and enhanced capabilities, these were still humans driven by the same curiosity and need to understand that Marcus felt every day. "Fascinating," said the lead seeker, a female whose armor pulsed with bioluminescent patterns that seemed to indicate excitement. Direct approach despite obvious tactical disadvantage. "Human, please explain your reasoning." Marcus felt Zaktar tense beside him, ready to explode into violence at the first sign of threat. But instead of answering the seeker's question, Marcus asked one of his own. "Why did you kill the subjects you study?" The question seemed to surprise the enhanced humans. They exchanged glances before the leader responded. "Death is not our objective. Understanding is our objective. Unfortunately, the depth of analysis required to achieve complete understanding often proves fatal to subjects." "But you could learn more from living subjects than dead ones," Marcus pointed out. "Living beings can explain their thought processes, describe their motivations, reveal the reasoning behind their actions." "Incorrect," another seeker replied. "Living subjects provide biased self-reporting. Direct analysis of neural structures and cognitive processes yields more accurate data." Marcus felt a wave of horror as he understood the seeker's methodology. They were treating consciousness like a machine to be disassembled and analyzed, never recognizing that the act of disassembly destroyed the very thing they were trying to understand. "You're studying the brain but missing the mind," Marcus said. "You're analyzing the hardware but losing the software." The seeker's expressions shifted, their armor patterns changing to colors that suggested intense interest. "Elaborate on this distinction," the leader commanded. And suddenly, Marcus understood what he needed to do. The seekers were enhanced humans, but they had lost something essential in their enhancement, the ability to understand through empathy rather than analysis. They could dissect consciousness, but they couldn't experience it. "I'll make you a deal," Marcus said, ignoring Zaktar's sharp intake of breath. "I'll explain human consciousness to you, show you how our minds work, demonstrate our thought processes. But in exchange, you release your current subjects unharmed." "Unacceptable," the leader replied immediately. "Current subjects represent valuable data sources. Your offer provides only single-species analysis." "No," Marcus corrected. "My offer provides something your methodology can never achieve, understanding of consciousness from the inside. I can explain not just what humans think, but how and why we think it." The silence that followed was heavy with possibility. Marcus could feel Zaktar's predatory tension beside him, ready to fight if negotiations failed. But he could also see genuine curiosity in the seeker's enhanced faces. "Furthermore," Marcus continued, "I can explain how human consciousness interfaces with HFY consciousness. You've been studying our species separately, but you've never analyzed how different types of intelligence can work together." That got their attention. The seekers moved to confer among themselves, their armor patterns shifting through rapid color changes that probably indicated intense discussion. But Marcus wasn't done. "War Singer," he said quietly to Zaktar, "when I give you the signal, I want you to do something that will seem completely insane." "Human Marcus," Zaktar replied in a voice barely above a whisper. "Everything you have done has seemed completely insane." The seekers finished their conference and turned back to face them. "Your proposal has merit," the leader announced. "We will release current subjects in exchange for complete psychological analysis of human HFY cooperative consciousness. You will submit to detailed examination." "Agreed," Marcus said, then added words that would have been impossible for him to speak just days earlier. "But the examination will be conducted as a partnership, not as subject and researcher. You want to understand consciousness? Then you need to understand trust." The leader's enhanced features showed confusion. "Explain." Marcus looked at Zaktar, meeting those golden predatory eyes with absolute certainty. "Warsinger," Marcus said formally, "I request blood brotherhood." The silence that followed was so complete that Marcus could hear the hum of individual electronics. Blood brotherhood was the highest honor among HFY, a bond that made beings literally family regardless of species. It was reserved for those who had proven themselves in combat, who had demonstrated courage and loyalty beyond question. No prey species had ever been offered blood brotherhood with a HFY. Zaktar's golden eyes blazed with something that might have been pride or amusement, or both. Without hesitation, he drew a ceremonial blade and made a precise cut across his palm, dark HFY blood welling from the wound. "Human Marcus Chen," Zaktar said in a voice that carried harmonics of ancient ritual. You have shown courage in the face of death, wisdom in the face of complexity, and honor in the face of impossible choices. I offer you blood brotherhood among the Kethvar. Marcus took the blade with steady hands and made his own cut, his red human blood mixing with dark Kethvar blood as they pressed their palms together. I accept the honor, Marcus replied, not knowing the proper words but speaking from the heart. I pledge my understanding to your strength, my analysis to your action, my questions to your answers. The ritual was simple but profound. As their blood mixed, Marcus felt something change in the space between them. Not just partnership, but genuine kinship, a bond that transcended species boundaries. When they turned back to face the Seekers, everything had changed. The enhanced humans stared at them with expressions of absolute shock. Their armor patterns were cycling through colors that indicated complete confusion. Impossible, the leader whispered. Kethvar do not form bonds with prey species. The biological and psychological incompatibilities make such relationships unsustainable. And yet here we are, Marcus said simply. But our analysis indicates that human psychology is fundamentally incompatible with Kethvar consciousness. Your species' emphasis on cooperation conflicts with their individualistic, predatory nature. Your weakness should trigger their hunting instincts, not protective behaviors. Marcus smiled, and for the first time in his life, the expression held something that might have been predatory. That's because you've been analyzing us separately, instead of understanding how we work together. You've been studying the components instead of the system. The Seekers moved closer, their enhanced senses probably analyzing everything from pheromone production to micro-expressions. But they were missing the most important aspect of what they were seeing. Show us, the leader demanded. Demonstrate this cooperative consciousness. Marcus looked at Zektar and nodded slightly. The War Singer's response was immediate and precise, a coordinated attack that utilized both their strengths simultaneously. But instead of attacking the Seekers, they attacked the research station itself. Zektar's enhanced strength and speed allowed him to physically destroy critical systems, while Marcus's understanding of alien technology let him reprogram others. In less than 30 seconds, they had systematically disabled every piece of analytical equipment in the chamber while simultaneously releasing all the containment fields holding the captured subjects. The Seekers stood frozen in shock as their carefully controlled research environment collapsed around them. This is how consciousness works together, Marcus explained calmly. Not through dominance or submission, but through complementary capabilities. Zaktar provides physical execution, while I provide analytical understanding. Together we can accomplish things that neither could achieve alone. 1. Alarms were sounding throughout the station as released prisoners began making their way toward escape pods. The Seekers' research project was dissolving into chaos. You have destroyed irreplaceable data, the leader said, her voice holding something that might have been anguish. We've demonstrated something more valuable than data, Marcus replied. We've shown you what consciousness actually looks like when it works cooperatively instead of competitively. The enhanced humans looked around at their ruined research facility, their armor patterns shifting through what appeared to be cycles of grief and confusion. Our analysis indicated that consciousness could only be understood through systematic dissection, the leader said quietly. Your analysis was incomplete, Zaktar rumbled. Consciousness is not a machine to be disassembled. It is a fire that burns brighter when combined with other flames. Marcus watched the Seekers process this information, seeing in their enhanced faces the same curiosity and drive to understand that he recognized in himself. But their enhancement had cost them something essential. The ability to understand through connection rather than analysis. We can teach you, Marcus offered, not through dissection or examination, but through experience. You want to understand consciousness? Join it instead of studying it. The Seekers looked at each other, their armor patterns cycling through rapid changes that suggested intense internal debate. This would require us to abandon our research methodology, the leader said finally. No, Marcus corrected. It would require you to expand your research methodology. Understanding through participation doesn't replace understanding through analysis. It complements it. The silence that followed was filled with the sound of survivors making their way to safety, their voices carrying relief and gratitude that echoed through the station's corridors. Finally, the lead seekers spoke. We will consider your proposal. But first, we must understand how blood brotherhood functions between incompatible species. Zaktar's smile was sharp and predatory, but it held warmth that had never been there before. Simple, the war singer replied. It functions through choosing to see strength in differences rather than seeking to eliminate them. As they prepared to leave the station, Marcus reflected on everything that had changed. He was no longer the weakest being in any room, not because he had become stronger, but because he had learned to be part of something larger than himself. The Seekers followed them to the docking bay, their research priorities fundamentally altered by what they had witnessed. They were no longer seeking to understand consciousness through destruction, but through the far more complex process of genuine connection. Blood brother, Zaktar said, as they boarded his ship, using the title for the first time.